Really pleased to have Rachel Briggs here. She is an incredibly talented artist and designer and person, and well, this is the first slide that she made, so that should give you some idea of what's about to happen, what's about to go down here. All we need to do now is give her a really warm welcome. Thanks for being here, Rachel. Come and tell us some things. Just the right arrow if you want.
Microphone. How far away can I stand from it? Okay. Today's theme is survival, which is defined. We're going to do the classic define the state or fact of continuing to live or exist, typically in spite of an accident, ordeal, hardship, difficulty. There's a little thing. Okay. Survival for me is different than maintaining. Maintaining is part of survival. It's an element of it. Survival to me is maintaining long enough so you can grow and change and adapt. There's a few possible elements that you're trying to maintain through. I'm sure a lot of us have gone through a lot of these things. Job stress, heartache, loss, death. You could also be suffering from, and I feel it like almost weekly, creative ruts. Creative ruts, familiar? Anybody? Just me? No, okay. Lack of inspiration or community, discouragement, low funds, if you're a freelancer, delay of funds from clients. Familiar? Yep. All of these things affect forward momentum in your work. They can affect your process and your creative thought and output. So we look to a way where we can figure out how to channel that energy into something positive. And to do that, we weigh our options, learn our boundaries, and that we can grow inside them and stretch them when we're ready. Surprise ourselves with what we can create of the possibility of bigger and better things. And that's not necessarily meaning clients or projects. It means what you're putting into your work. I kind of want to see, like, how many people are designers? I know we have a mix of designers, illustrators, developers, things like that. Designers. Cool. Illustrators? Sweet. Developers, web people. Okay, cool. Well, know my audience then. All right. So before we kind of dive in, each of you here are here because of Creative Mornings. You were up early because you feel the pull to listen, maybe learn something new, gain a new perspective, to commiserate with all your fellow creatives, find your birds of a feather, have some biscuits. But I really want this to be something you hear this morning, no matter what job you do, and if you're a student or an artist working a 9 to 5, you're working part-time and you're finding some other means of employment and maybe working late at night or in your free time on your art, or you've landed a job and you are creating your little, carved your way into the fabric of perhaps design, illustration, architecture, web development, what have you. Wherever you may be on your path, know, I'm going a little too quick. Know that this is going to be your little shot in the arm, that already you are unique in a way that a lot of the world isn't. Maybe you're aware of it, maybe you're not fully aware of it, and you're just looking and loving and making nice, pretty things. But I encourage you to look within today and remind yourself of that tiny little spark, because if you don't give voice to it, you don't have that little creative anchor within. When the going gets tough, it's going to be very tough to weather certain elements, and more on that in a second. So I'm Rachel Briggs. I'm an illustrator and designer, and I've worked in that capacity for about 12 years now, professionally. Real quick, this is the first 2 photos I ever took with my first camera when I was a little kid, and I love it. It's probably highly illegal that many balloons were released. You can see the frisk in the background. We came to Nashville I don't even remember what the event was for, but it's kind of terrifying, but also kind of neat. I was born and raised in Memphis. I have two parents who encourage education and the arts from an early age. So I was I was lucky to be exposed to those things as I grew and developed. The long story short of my college path was that I moved to Nashville because I loved music, and I'm sure a lot of people have come through that route. Somewhere in college, I became obsessed with small zines and independent press, small publication. I was hanging out a lot at Tower Records when it was open, and there was a little bookstore where Halcyon Bikes used to be. I think now it's like the filling station, but there was a bookstore there called Halcyon Books a long time ago that had zines, independent press. I hung out there all the time. I started to love that, and I had grown up in the arts and doing art, and so I kind of came back to visual arts through that. And I really kind of latched on to McSweeney's Publishing. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Great publishing company that I started subscribing to their quarterly issues. They really pay attention to detail and just wit and humor in the work that they do. And so when I was in college, I was kind of going towards music. I switched to business because I wanted to kind of work for myself, entrepreneurship. I wanted to work in a small publication, so I wanted to maybe write after college, which is kind of crazy, and then I wound up designing. So that's my path, and I'm sure you figure out your way through it, and you kind of learn along the way what works and what doesn't work. So it's cool if you don't have a clear path. 2007, I worked as a junior designer and became art director of American Songwriter magazine and was on the small business team there for almost 7 years. So please excuse this terrible design. I was young. This was my first cover. We had to put Mandy Moore on it, and I was like, oh yeah, pop art. Ugh, okay. Yeah, so that was where the first element of survival I kind of experienced on a small team. It was a time when all magazines were dying, and they still kind of are, and we were very aware of that. The way we laid out issues, the content that we put in, the way we had to get creative to serve our subscriber base, and we were dealing with closing bookstores, closing newsstands, drop in subscribers, shift in technology, cost of print ads versus digital ads is way crazy, and so that's what funds the magazine. We had minimal budget due to all of these things, so we were constantly in a survival mode with each issue. It takes creative digestion to kind of go through those times. And so in my tenure there, I worked on laying out each issue, pre-pressed all the files, organized photo shoots, dealt with angry publicists and bands, and I also answered phones, delivered copies to local vendors, mailed out media kits. It was kind of all hands on deck. So that was an interesting experience. I'm sure there's some of you that work on a small team, and you're working through really kind of dog-eat-dog industries, and you have to survive through those things. And I think looking back at my time in American Songwriter, it helped me in my own practice, and I'll explain that in a bit. So these are just some covers of some of the things we did back in the day, still around, still being published. Squeezer. I like the tube socks that he chose to wear on the cover. My morning jacket. And we did a photo shoot with Wilco. So I was going through at the very end of American Songwriter, I was going through a very unstable personal time. It was everything all at once. I had a relationship that was ending. My mother was sick. I felt burnout. My living situation was in upheaval. I was making some questionable decisions with work and life, and I was entering into my soul-stopping late 20s. Which you think is going to be the end of the world, guys, if you're under 28, but it's not, because the 30s are great. I will never go back to my 20s. I saw trends in myself in getting lazy with my work, feeling drastically uninspired, and in the middle of it, I parted ways with the magazine and entered into the faceless, amorphous void of what I like to call, is it working? Yeah. So blood dripping, it's like a metaphor because it's like a scary film, and that's how it felt scary. So survival mode kicks in. There was a little thing inside me, aside from a barren bank account, which I'm sure we have all felt, still kind of feel it sometimes, that I had to get up, I had to start moving, start working, stop sleeping excessively, taking sad naps. channel that anger and sadness into something. How do you deal with it? I'm an artist. I have to create. That's how all masterpieces and like love songs are made, which is like very poetic, but I'm going to say it because I'm an artist. So I began working, and so I'm just going to kind of breeze through some stuff real quick. I made posters and album arts and illustrations for bands. Like right after I left American Songwriter, I just kind of like dove into like, there's a few people in here that I've worked with like right after that. I learned what I didn't want to do by taking almost anything that came my way. I even looked at Craigslist, needing designers, which was an interesting experience. I worked part-time designing magazines for the Army Reserve, the Daughters of the American Revolution, a Civil War documentary in which they like needed illustrations of like smallpox patients. That was when I was like, what am I doing? I moved to Chicago for a spell and went back into full-time realm of work, had a tremendous learning experience. I worked at Time Out Magazine, which was a weekly publication. It felt like a newsroom rather than like my kind of 6-issue-old magazine job. It was there, being in a city that I knew no one. I was very lonely. I survived on work and just kind of diving into it. I dealt with that season and I submerged myself in it. And I encourage you, like that's just one thing to kind of deal with a situation as an artist. And with that, I began developing commercial illustrations more for the magazine. And I was drawing internal, just editorial illustrations for them and developing art for their children's issue. So these are just some examples. This was for a Black Friday sale. I'm going to show some process work because I think that's kind of interesting. I like seeing other artists. This was for a Powder Puff football team article. Eventually I moved back when my time was up because the magazine folded, so there we go, survival. And for the past 5 or 6 years, through foggy patches and late deadlines and huge ruts of design fatigue, and on to personal things like death and loss, isolation, solitude, I now work for myself. A few projects that I'm proud of, I create album art, music videos, murals, personal work, and I have never left survival mode. You're kind of living on it as a freelancer. So I'm just gonna kind of go through and show you some things, and then we're gonna like talk about how we survive. These are just some posters at the you'll kind of hopefully see things get a little cleaner, but when I was first starting out, you might know some of these artists in town. Just started doing posters for venues. Kind of pushed, if I had some time, I would try to like, illustrate a little bit more. This was for Billy Reed and K-Swiss. This is kind of when I was leaving American Songwriter. William Tyler, great local artist. Did some stuff for Grimey's a couple, I guess last year for their record store day. Grand Palace, made the shirts, the Wizards at Grand Palace. Some personal stuff that I've started to work on kind of a graphic novel tinge, so this is something I'm developing at the moment. Some little book I made. And kind of going into band stuff. I do a lot of merchandise and product for bands. So it's for Willie Watson, the bandana, Grand Palace printed shirt. John Paul White of Civil Wars did his tour poster and a few things for him. Again, some more things for William Tyler. This is kind of more recent. This was a show, Turnpike Troubadours and Musicians Corners. Anybody go to Musicians Corner? Great. Free concert series in Parthenon Park. So early on, I started making these posters for this event that would pop up called Poetry Sucks, which was kind of like to try to use reverse psychology to be like, come and hear poetry. And so the challenge was that the guy who was organizing it wanted a poem on each poster. So I did a lot of those, and that kind of led me to do some work with Third Man Books and the record label here in town. And so I've worked on some like poetry broadsides for them, and even did a music video for Pokey Lafarge where we had some jazz dancers and a banner, and it was a lot of fun. This is a mural I did for CMT, like their break rooms, all coffee themed. I've also done some backdrops. This was a backdrop designed for Little Big Town for a couple of summers ago for their summer tour. And this was a lot of fun to work with them on. And so it's crazy to kind of see the flow of how something can come from sketchbook to like, Madison Square Garden. We used different kinds of paints to like utilize the lights. So that was really neat. Okay. And then I'm just going to breeze through. These are just some album arts of bands that we all know and love in town. Los Colones. Worked with a record label in Memphis called Pent. We utilized the Mississippi state logo a little bit. This is for Uni Records, represent. Jason Isbell a while ago. And this is more recent, Drew Holcomb in the Neighbors cover. And this just came out, Chuck Berry album art, which was kind of crazy. That was a little wild because I didn't even know it was for that when I was working on it. They kind of kept it secret. And so the last thing I'll talk about of my work, and then we'll move on, is if you're familiar with Wiseacre beer out of Memphis, it's really good beer, which helps working with them. But I started working with them right after I started going freelance, and it's been about 4 years now that I worked with them from the development of the company that they were pitching to investors all the way to now, and we're like millions of cans in, and they're awesome to work with. And anyway, I'll just show you a few of the things that I've done for them. Tiny Bomb was our first can. It's the first canned beer in Tennessee, which is kind of exciting. And this is Tarrasque. If you're not familiar, a lot of the things that Wiseacre do, that they have stories and themes with each of their beers. So this one was it's a real myth. It's a French myth about a water dragon that has a cat head, bare feet, a turtle, and a scorpion hybrid, and he lives in the river and he eats people. So you see like the little dude getting eaten, and then a nun who I kind of looked like me a little bit, comes and sings to him, hypnotizes him, and then kills him. So that was what they wanted on the beer can. And anyway, I think I kind of pulled it off. That one was pretty fun. This is Oktoberfest, straightforward, German folk inspired. Got to get up to get down. Coffee milk stout. It's kind of like you're drinking iced coffee, but alcoholic. Starless is our winter lager. In this one, we made each of us like a spirit animal. So I'm the hawk over the tea, and then the two owners are the raccoon and the flying bear. So they wanted themselves in the can. So that's what the can looks like. Adjective animal, another weird can they wanted. Here's just some more. Boom Slang is out now. And they're just a lot of fun, and it's a great kind of client relationship where they're just very creative as well. These are just some more. Snowbeard, he's an angry Norse god who likes his barley wine. They wanted Benjamin Franklin nude on one because he used to like to take air baths like in his garden, and so that was it took me a second to figure that out. So I did that. Just a little. You don't want to see some of the sketches. We're like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. Golgi apparatus, just crazy. This is one that we do every summer where I change the bathing suits depending on the flavor. So we had peach, so this is this year's watermelon. And these are new things that haven't come out yet, so you're getting a sneak peek. Don't tell Wiseacre that I'm showing you. This is, we have a new can coming out, Memphis Sands. This is a kind of a pattern I started working with of fossils because Tennessee used to be under an ocean. So it's all about the water aquifers in Memphis and how the water it's really good. And so how that affects the beer. They wanted the chart on the can, and I'm like, well, that's gonna look weird. But I think, made it work. And then this is top secret, but we have a new one coming out called Love Light, which is based off an old blues song. So I was thinking I'll just do like an old blues thing. So anyway, that's all you get to see of that. All right, so now because I'm an illustrative person and I like illustrative things, I'm going to try to keep this alive. So let's be open for a bit. We're in a safe place. We're not at our desk or conference room. Let's imagine something. The WONDERBEAST, right? Remember when I said that little thing that you have inside of you? I call it the WONDERBEAST, which is kind of cheesy, but I'll say back to you, have you met a beast that's cheesy? No. You might have met a gentle beast, but there's still a beast. There's something primal that has been fed by fear and awareness, just like a plant cutting through sidewalk, a seabird fighting a sea storm to get its food. I drew some birds for today, and seabirds have different barometers within where they can weather the storm. And so to use that metaphor, how can we do this? How can we condition ourselves where it becomes something natural? It's about shifting focus, becoming aware, and feeding, not too much, your WONDERBEAST. There he is. He's just living inside you guys. He's a little hungry. So first steps of maintaining your WONDERBEAST, and don't let them distract you. So remember yourself, and that's pretty straightforward. A lot of these are just straightforward. What is it that makes you unique as an artist? What do you bring to the table that others don't? What skill or talent have you been born with, or have you developed through work that is significant to you and to your creative output? Remember it. If you're thinking about it, write it down right now, and give yourself time and space to develop it. On the other hand, look beyond yourself in your realm. Be aware of the world around you, the needs of others, deficits, wherever they are, in your community, in your town. And we'll go into that in a little bit. Take risks. That's straight up. Do something entirely different. If you feel like you need to grow in in the work that you do, try a new technique, try a new style. Right now I'm trying to get into like little animation, as you can see. But just trying to do new things that maybe you're not comfortable with, and that's just those are baby steps. You can like go, full on out. But growth happens when you experience that. Maintain a sense of wonder, which is a very dreamy way to say, don't get caught up in the hustle, which means, I catch myself doing it every day where I'm in the emails and I'm answering and I'm like, sorry for the delay, or like, I'm getting the work done and I forget myself in the situation. And I encourage you to get out of the hustle and go outside, because nature is our first reference point, I feel like, for me at least. And when you get outside, or you get metaphorically and physically into nature, I feel like your mind can open up a bit. And when those tough times come, you're going to be a little bit more stable in knowing yourself. So it's kind of like a big know thyself. And feed the beast. Always feed it with all of these things, and his appetite will grow. The more you feed it, the more it wants. It will never be satiated if you keep this up, and that's the point, because never satiate the WONDERBEAST. Yeah. Don't ever do it, because that hunger is going to be what drives you. A few more things. The awareometer. Everybody needs to have it. It lives in the house of the WONDERBEAST. And what that is, they're instruments. This is an instrument you need, and it somewhat speaks for itself. And so we'll just talk about the awareometer. First off is an awareness that this too shall pass. This is a season. If you're going through a hard time, this is a season that will be with you for a short period of time in the grand scheme of things, or it might stick with you the rest of your life. But in that, you can learn to change and develop. But it won't be forever. Know that there's always going to be movement. You'll get used to something, you'll get over something, you'll work through it, hopefully with some of these ideas. Secondly is empathy for others, and this goes hand in hand with the next point, but if you don't treat others like yourself, golden rule, as we've all been taught, you're not going to go very far, and that is personally and also with clients and business. Pay attention to your surroundings. We kind of talked about this already, but what is happening in the world? What is happening in our country? Anything happening? I don't know. In your neighborhood, in your community, it's kind of like an upheaval. I'm sure a lot of people are feeling and experiencing it. in your field, and what can you do to play a part in helping or abating something to grow, change, and enhance in somebody's life? Because when you look outside yourself, you'll start to see some new things. And this is very important. Be aware of how you're conducting business. Keep track of the details of what you're doing. This is not all like heady, dreamy stuff. Like I would love it to be, but I've learned the hard way that you've got to like really be on top of stuff. And when you're going through some like tough times, it's good to be like, no, I know, like I'm in control. So what is working, what isn't? Remember the important stuff like taxes, time, effort. Don't undersell yourself. And that kind of goes with the next point. Be self-aware and have some self-maintenance, because sometimes you won't be able to finish something, or sometimes you need your heart and your health, heart and head health first. Self-sabotage is a real thing, speaking from really personal experience, self-saboteur. You got to really know your limit, and you have to be also kind to yourself when you're going through that. And this will affect your soul barometer, which is a thing that I made up, but you can use. So what is the soul barometer? It has all of these different things. The honesty you put it into your working relationship. Be honest with how long something is going to take you. I'm speaking from like freelance experience, but this is also if you're employed, like know what you're capable of doing, and you have to be honest, straight up with your client. And also with yourself, because that's where the stress is going to come. This is all about taking some of that stress away as other stress is happening to you. The honesty you put into work you give to a client. Don't dial it in. Be honest in what you put into your work for your client. You don't want to dial it in. You don't want to like just, I catch myself. We all do it. I'm still doing it. But it's like, I don't want to be that kind of designer or artist or professional person that's dialing it in. I want to give my best to the client within reason. And that involves making time and giving thought to a project. Really bad about overcommitting. And you have to learn that, and that is just by maybe experiencing it. And also knowing when enough is enough. Sometimes when you're drawing like smallpox patients for a Civil War documentary, you know you don't need to give your whole heart into it, or it will change something in you. So know when enough is enough. You have your limit, and you find the happy balance between what you're putting in and what the project is. And really important, and we don't say it enough, but remember your ethics. Don't undersell your industry. Don't underquote yourself. Your work is worth something, what you're bringing to the table. Don't overquote either. Like, no, just be honest, because find that balance of like what you're working on, the time you're putting in, what the project is for, and if you really want the job, the worst thing that you could do is be like, I'm gonna do it for way less. You're underselling other designers. You're like not bringing honesty to the industry, and so I emphasize that because you're worth it. You deserve more. There's another WONDERBEAST. Other things to consider, almost done here. Create a space in your home and work where you can thrive. I worked from home for 3 years. I created my front room as like my workspace. Right now I'm sharing it with some good friends. I have a separate workspace that we call the Hawk Mother Nest, and it's just a nice environment to work in. So if you can invest some time and space into your work, then that's like really important. Research your craft, know what's going on. Don't look too much. Don't look too much at Dribble, guys, because it gets a little depressing out there. Know that you're bringing stuff to the table, but know what's, see what the trends are, maybe go against them, or make them more of your own. Work on time management. So that I'm preaching to myself here, and it's all about making sure that you're being efficient. And again, all of these things are very good while you're going through a tough time. If you can get these a good hold on these before you go in. And I've said it before, but be kind to yourself. Just know your limits and know what you can offer. And also, never satiate the WONDERBEAST. And there's a little animation again. Okay. And so, anyway, thank you. You can find me here on Instagram, Twitter, Wires and Fires, or in the stars in the evening sky. I'm up there whispering to you. And yeah, thanks.